This is TWiT.
First of all, we should say that Google has not announced this, but there was a rumor that Google was going to work on a censored version of Google Search. This comes from The Intercept, Ryan Gallagher, for China. Leaked documents reveal Google's planning to launch a censored version of its search engine in China that will blacklist websites and search terms about human rights, democracy, religion, peaceful protest, all the things the Chinese government doesn't like. According to The Intercept, the project, codenamed Dragonfly, has been underway since the spring of last year. Was accelerated in December when Sundar Pichai met with a top Chinese government official. And there are huge protests at Google from Google employees who say, no, we got out of China because we didn't for a good reason. Their human rights record.
So we talked about this last week.
Oh, it's over. Okay, never mind.
No. I was going to say
the stories kept going. Yeah.
Yeah, the story kept going. So last week it had just broken, and Jeff and I were talking about. Jeff, as one can imagine, was this is evil. Google should draw a line and stick to it. I didn't use the word
evil, but I said I was disappointed.
Yeah, and I think that I've said before when it comes to Apple, for instance, working with the Chinese government. That American companies need to stand up and say we're not going to work in authoritarian regimes, even if we could make a lot of money there.
You could argue that they work with authoritarian regimes right now in the U.S. But
this is not an authoritarian regime.
What I'm going to say,
come on, you may not like it, but we do. This is not comparable to China yet.
There are some practices that are actually. But
I guess
I was going to say,
all right,
I was waiting for.
As long as you're not an immigrant, it's okay here.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, I was waiting for Google employees to weigh in, and they did. And predictably, they are unhappy. So I will see. I'm curious what happens from that perspective if individual Googlers end up preventing this, or what goes on there.
This is that old argument companies make that, well, we have to obey the laws of the countries we work in. The thing that's different about Google is Google
choose to be in them.
Google decided not to do business in China because of its human rights record, and now they're apparently considering going back. It's, of course, tempting because there's a lot of money to be made in China. It's a billion Chinese people who are active, avid internet users in many cases.
I'll make a prediction.
Go ahead.
Even if they do everything in China once, which is a lot more now than it would have been when they left, which is a story up on the rundown, the rules have gotten worse and worse. Even if they did everything that China wanted, they'll fail there because you have to be a Chinese company to succeed.
Yeah, Baidu has said, "Oh, we'll beat them easy. Come on in, Google." Baidu is the Google of China. So China already blocks Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat. So Google would have to block all that. This is from The Observer. Anything that's anti-communism party content, any political dissidents, of course, that's obvious. Controversial news content, pornography.
Controversial being defined as things that are critical of government.
Yeah. Revelations of business or political scandals. Anything harmful to social stability. Pornography, gambling, and violence. Winnie the Pooh is banned in China, and that goes back to the fact that dissidents compared President Xi to a bear. During his visit to the U.S. in 2013, a meme comparing a photo of him and Barack Obama to an image of Pooh and Tigger went viral in China. Xi didn't like it. Winnie the Pooh's been banned ever since. Google, do you really want to be in a country where an autocratic leader can ban an image because he doesn't like it? Because he finds it insulting?
I don't know. It's just the world now. What are you going to do about it?
What I find interesting, this is not the first time Google employees have become vocal activists against company policy. Not a lot of companies have that problem. Most employees just go along.
Microsoft and where did I put up the third one? There was a story here that said this, that that there have been employee revolts on ethical issues at Google and Microsoft. And what was the third one? I can't find it.
TWiT. No.
TWiT.
Apple?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Apple employees were.
They're in a highly lucrative field, and they are such Amazon. Yeah, and there's such competition for the workers.
Not Apple, though. Interesting.
Either way. Yeah. So
and not Facebook.
Not Facebook.
I think, they're secure in their jobs in the sense that if they get fired from Google, they probably can go work at another company.
Yeah.
That's true. So this is specifically, it's a story in nationalinterest.org about what they call engineering insurgency, and say that these were 3 potential protests around the use of AI. Right? At Google, it was the drone image AI.
That's right.
It's been
Amazon
killer
recognition.
robots.
Isn't this what we've been calling for, though? Is that technologists should be aware of the consequences of their inventions and actions, and should be responsible, and should stand up?
I think so.
Yeah, I
interviewed Jonathan Zunger.
Love Jonathan
for a project. He's brilliant, and
he was at Google. He was a Google engineer.
He was at Google. He's left to go to startup. He's really smart, and he said that software engineers have to develop the same kind of standards of behavior as civil engineers did. A civil engineer would build a bridge, and the goal was it better not fall down.
Right.
If it fell down, you haven't done your job. So what's the equivalent? It's a lot easier to see a bridge and see whether it's up or down, but what's the equivalent in software engineering and the impact you have and the danger you present? And that it's a professional standard that has to develop. I think he's smart and right.
If you throw that out, so I'm going to take it a step further. If you build a bridge that falls down, that is obviously a bad thing. But what if you build a bridge and it allows movement of populations from one place to another and thus changes a culture? Because I think the analogy, but civil engineers don't actually have to think about that. And what we're asking technologists to do is actually that step further. Because you could say, hey, does your code work? Yeah. So, and usually if you're thinking about building a bridge, you actually do something like that under municipal auspices. So you have a vote for bond issues to build such bridge or whatever. So I'm just throwing that out there as a thought process, because that's a more democratic thing to think about. And we're trying to assign responsibility to these people. And I don't know how far whose job is it to look ahead for the impact of some of these things? Not just that, anyway.
Well, you're absolutely right, Stacey, and it's whose job and how possible is it to really know the impact? I'm going back to my Gutenberg stuff, right? It took 100 years to get a lot of the impact in place, and we're guessing at it, and we don't know. And you're right, you may be building something that has a positive impact. And my moral panic arguments is if you cut off potential bad impact, you don't know what you're losing. So yeah, it's hard, but I think you have to have some ethic of impact, some ethic of thinking about this. Now, I will not go as far as Tristan Harris arguing that these are all made to addict us and that's evil. That doesn't give us enough agency and enough credit. We're giving people choices that they can make, but we've got to have an ethic of worrying about it a little bit.
It's interesting because I'm sure that the original leak to The Intercept probably came from a Google employee working on this. And since the leak, The Intercept reports that on a number of Google sites, people are saying yes. In fact, a number of other Googlers have independently confirmed the plan to Reuters, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Financial Times Agency, France Press, Vice News, and Bloomberg. One source, this is from The Intercept, one source who spoke to Bloomberg characterized the product as a censorship engine. Remember, Google got out of China in 2010, at that time saying it was because of Chinese government efforts to limit free speech, block websites, and hack Google. So
and force Google to change Google, rather than the government saying this is illegal, don't do this, and you choose yes or no.
Right.
It's not unlike what's happening in some parts of the European regulation. No, we're going to make you do it, Google. As I remember.
Yeah, but I'm looking at the blog post from March 22nd, 2010. This followed on the heels of Google announcing that they and 20 other U.S. companies have been the victims of a cyber attack originating from China. They were looking for the Gmail accounts of dozens of human rights activists, and it was at that time. Yeah. Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, it was at that time Google, this is how they did it, stopped censoring our search services, Google Search, Google News, and Google Images on Google.cn, the Chinese version of Google. Users visiting Google.cn are now simply redirected to the Hong Kong version where we are offering uncensored search. And so that's been the status quo for the last 8 years since then. So what it sounds like is they want to bring back Google CN, and in order to do that, of course, you'd have to comply with those Chinese government regulations about what search engines what results they can produce.